Imagine you are meeting a friend in a crowded city. They aren't wearing anything distinctive, they don't have a phone, and you can't simply describe them. And so, what do you do in order to meet up? So, you probably tell them something along the lines of, hey, please stand next to this big clock tower in the city market. So that when you are on the spot, you don't look for the friend first, you look for the big old clock tower on the market, and you look right next to it to find your friend. And by doing that, you are finding your anchor and looking at the element next to it. And in this specific way, we are also solving one of the most pressing issues in test automation, which is finding an element which can't really be easily uniquely identified. It doesn't have an ID, it doesn't have any unique attribute which we can target, but it has a neighbor or a parent which we can easily target. So we target that one first and we use it as an anchor in order to target the element that we are really after. And this concept is called XPath axes. And so today I am going to teach you this specific trick, the neighbor trick, targeting an element which can't really be easily identifiable by targeting something that is next to it or above it. Because so far we have only learned how to traverse the DOM hierarchy down, but today we are going to utilize the full power of XPath in order to learn to navigate the DOM hierarchy up and sideways. Welcome to Testeroni. I'm Casper and I'm here to help QA engineers become test automation engineers one slice at a time. So let's jump to the internet app that we used during the previous lessons too. And so let's imagine that we want to target this input field. We have already learned in the previous lessons that we can right-click inspect, and in this scenario we already went over this, that we have the ID, which is a really good attribute to target. But for a second, for the purpose of this lesson, let's imagine that this ID is not there. And in order to not stop at imagining, we can actually temporarily remove this argument, because when you are in the DevTools, you can right-click on any attribute, do edit attribute, and then you can simply delete and press enter. And then this whole element looks as if it did not have any ID attribute to begin with. Don't worry, you are not hacking the website. It's still there. If you so much as refresh the page, it'll be there. So don't worry about that. But for the purpose of this demonstration, we are going to remove this whole attribute. So in this situation, it may be harder to identify it. It's still not impossible because we have a pretty good, stable and descriptive name. But let's imagine that this name is also something weird, like alphanumeric characters which are automatically generated by the front-end framework, for example. And so in this situation, we don't really have anything to go off of because the ID is gone. The name isn't something that's stable because when we look at it, it seems like something automatically generated that may suddenly change a day after. But so we cannot target this element uniquely and easily as we used to be able to. So what can we do? We can't target this element, but remember we are looking for our clock tower. We are looking for an anchor. So what's an anchor that's close by and it's stable? We can see that we have the username label, and it's basically certain that it's going to stay in this spot because it's describing the input field that is present below. So we can right-click on this, and we have this label for username, and so maybe we can use this as our clock tower in order to then move to the input field, which is on the same level in the DOM hierarchy. You can see that both of these reside inside this div. So we can target this thing, for example, because it's stable. We know that it's going to stay to contain the text username. And by having this utilized, we can then target the input. So let's do that. Let's try and target the label first. I am going to utilize the dot trick that we have learned in one of our previous lessons. So first of all, remember that when you are here in the DevTools in the Elements panel, you can do Ctrl F as if you were looking for something, and then we can start creating a locator here. So we are looking for any input. Then we'll utilize the contains function that we have also learned. So contains dot. We are using dot instead of text because we don't want to play with all the possible white space characters or the possible nesting of tags in case something is invisible, but it's actually nested. So we want this to work 100%. So we do dot, and we want it to contain username. Of course, we're targeting the label, not the input first. I'm getting ahead of myself because, of course, we are targeting the input field eventually, but first we need to target our clock tower, which is the label. So yeah, we have the label, we have it uniquely identified. It's stable because it's targeting a label element which contains username. Since we are on the login page, it's very unlikely for anything else to contain that. And it's supposed to be stable because probably it's not going to change anytime soon. So in this scenario, we have the first step of our strategy down already because we have already identified the clock tower. So now let's move on to finding the friend that's standing next to it. So now let's utilize the specific placement of these elements inside the DOM hierarchy. So as we have already discussed, we have the input tag being a neighbor, which is also called a sibling inside the hierarchy, and it's after the input comes after the label. So they are on the same level because they are both inside the div class, inside the div, and then we have both of them residing next to each other. And so we can use one of the magic commands that XPath allows us to use, which is called a following-sibling. I know it looks scary, but it's just plain English. It means exactly what it looks like it means. So it's following-sibling, : and then you specify the tag. And so we have the input highlights it. We have uniquely identified the input, even though we have not utilized any tags, characteristic, or text inside of that element at all. We have only utilized the structure of the other elements. We uniquely identify the element by the relation it has to other elements. So this is this command that we have used. This is signifying the relation to other elements. So first we identify the label, like we have discussed, and then from the label, we go to the following sibling, we do 2 colon operators and provide the input tag. And if you are interested, you can also provide the wildcard that we have learned before. In this case, this will work too because it only has one sibling afterwards. So you can also use the star, the asterisk symbol. But it's better to be precise, so we can just do the input. And so in this case, we have a match. All right, so now we know how to find the neighbor or the sibling. But what if we want to find the parent? Let's say that we want to actually, let's maybe collapse all of this, and we want to actually target this form, this whole form that encompasses the whole authentication, all the input fields, labels, buttons. Let's say we want to actually target that. So maybe let's first try by targeting the button, because remember, we want to find our clock tower. In this case, it will be easy enough to target it in and of itself because we have the ID of login here. But once again, let's imagine we don't have that. Let's imagine that the name is also some alphanumeric gibberish. Let's imagine that we don't have an easy way of identifying the form. So we first need to identify the anchor, the clock tower. And so our clock tower may be the button because it looks the most promising to easily target it when we are looking at the first level children of this form element. So how can we target the button? We have already actually solved this puzzle in one of the previous videos. We can do button, utilize our contains function, and have the login being targeted. So as we have discussed, we are using the dot operator here instead of a text function because we actually have the icon inside, and we are using the contains because there is a white space. We don't want to think about any of that, so we just do contains.login. It is also a nice stable locator because it's very unlikely for another button that contains the login text to appear on the same page since we are on the authentication page. So we have uniquely identified our clock tower. And now, how do we move from that clock tower not to something that's next to it, but something that's one level above? And a shortcut for a parent is simply 2 periods. So we can do slash 2 periods, and we go to the immediate parent. So this is the same 2 periods that you would use if you were, say, traversing a file system inside of a file explorer. So this is the very same structure that you are using here. So you just do slash and 2 dots and you have the parent. And you can do 2 dots again and then you have the parent of that one and the parent of that one and the parent of that one. So you can traverse the whole tree using something like this. And you can go both ways. So you can go to the parent and then you can once again target the button that you have just came from and you end up at the button again. So you can do up and down. It's not like when you select the direction you cannot go back. Of course you can. So you can go both directions. That's also the great thing about XPath. It's bidirectional. So you can traverse the DOM hierarchy sideways, up, down, and all within one command. It's very, very powerful. But in this example, we want to target the form. So we have already done that because we just did slash and 2 dots and we went to the immediate parent. This is a great trick for also targeting like table rows or cards in a specific sequence. You can always go to the parent and utilize the clock tower, the neighbor trick, and go to the parent and get to the element you want to get to from there. Now, if you Google XPath axes, so the thing that we have just learned, you will probably be bombarded with a list of like 13 possible functions that you can use. So you can do preceding sibling, following sibling, ancestor, descendant, and so on and so forth. Now, I am going to make this easy for you. Just forget about 90% of them. The only thing you need, basically, from that list is following sibling. So the very thing that we have just done. Maybe from WhatsApp, from time to time, you can do preceding sibling. It works the same way, but if in the DOM hierarchy, the sibling, the neighbor they were targeting came before the element that is the clock tower, then you can do preceding sibling. In any other scenario, it's the following sibling like we did. So forget about 90% of those things. Don't really focus on them because they will just tire you out and make it look like it's more complicated than it is. In the case of XPath, you only need to know 3 operators. 1, double slash to target an element regardless of where it is placed on the page. 2, the dot dot operator to go up the hierarchy. And 3, the following sibling. That's the only 3 things. Master these moves and don't worry about any of the rest. So now you have the full toolkit. You know how to target the elements by the attributes, be it the ID, class, or something more exotic. You know how to target them by the contents, because you know the text function and the do trick operator and the contains function. And you know how to target them by the relationships. So that's what we have just learned using the following sibling, using the dot dot or the period operator to go up the hierarchy. So now there are no untestable apps for you because you can navigate everywhere. You have all the tools needed to navigate any kind of complex DOM hierarchy. So now I want you to go ahead and practice this neighbor trick that we have learned today. Go to any website and try to target a good clock tower, which is a good fit, which you know how to evaluate right now. Try and find the clock tower and try to find the elements next to it. Some elements that are before it or that come after it, or the parents try to navigate, go up and down the hierarchy. It will feel like magic, and I want you to utilize it and to be able to exercise this magic to the fullest. And I want you to exercise it because in the very next video, we are going to actually implement what we have learned over these past few videos to create a real script. So until then, please practice this magic trick. Remember to like and subscribe in order not to miss it. And I will see you there, but please be sure to keep on rocking.